Hello and welcome to Inside EMA, a podcast about the science behind medicine's regulation and the people who make it possible. I'm Sophie Labbe from the communications team here at EMA, and today we will be talking about the next pandemic. Are we ready for it? I'm joined today by Marco Cavaleri, who is the head of public health threats here at EMA. Hello, Marco.
Hello, Sophie. Great to be here with you.
So head of public health threats, I guess you're exactly the right person for this discussion today, right person for the job.
I hope so.
Hope so. So let's give a sense of who you are. So Marco is a pharmacologist, has worked in R&D in various infectious diseases throughout the years. And you might remember him from the COVID-19 times when he was one of the leading figures handling the pandemic here at EMA. So before looking into future pandemics, maybe we need to look back a little bit and go back into the COVID-19 pandemic and how we did in that context. One figure that I find quite striking is that it is estimated that between 14 to 20 million lives were saved by COVID-19 vaccination in the first year of vaccination alone. Looking back at COVID-19, what are the key lessons learned for you?
The pandemic indeed has been quite a tragic but also insightful experience for me and about what we did here at DMA in order to advance vaccines and treatment for saving life. And indeed, these results that indicate that vaccines in the first year, they saved millions of lives throughout the world is impressive and demonstrates the importance of what we do here and the importance of advancing vaccines and therapeutics as much as possible. The sooner they get to people, the more we can save. And therefore, the big lesson learned here that we should continue working now that the pandemic is over in order to be better prepared for the next one. Because only with a good work in preparedness we will be in the right place and have the ability of very rapidly assess and approve new vaccines and therapeutics that can have such a big impact on people.
Because I think during the pandemic we approved 8 vaccines for the public, so that for you was a good maybe conclusion to the work that you had carried out already in preparing for this pandemic, I suppose.
It was indeed a great achievement, and also all the work that we've done with all the other vaccines that unfortunately could not make it because we scrutinized many more vaccines than those 8 that we ended up approving in the first year. And this illustrates the importance of having, this vaccine ready for approval as soon as possible. There is a study that also has been published recently that indicated with some modeling that if the vaccine could be approved at least 100 days earlier than what they have been, probably could have saved other millions of lives. And these numbers are impressive and should make us think that in the future we need to improve how we do it, how we are able to really advance our decision making and making sure that new vaccines therapy gets to patients as soon as possible.
Thank you. I mean, this is what we achieved during the pandemic. We had a lot of achievements and we're kind of happy about the work that was done. But I also have a question, and I'm interested to hear about your personal experience during this pandemic, because you were basically everywhere, literally involved in everything, all the COVID matters at EMA, but also very much the public face of the pandemic for EMA, one of the public faces of EMA. So how is it for you personally to become such a public figure from one day to the next?
It has been quite a challenge and quite an experience, I have to say. But I really felt right from the start that I had in mind what had to be done. So I had a clear vision of what needed to be put in place, what were the important achievements, what would have been the role of the EMA and the regulatory system in Europe, and how to collaborate also externally in order to be successful in our work, which again, our work is protect public health. So I never forget any day of my working life that's the purpose of my work. And this sense of purpose has been what has been driving me throughout all these years, because we are talking about years in which indeed, there were no weekends, no evening available. Everything had to be dedicated to the work that we were doing. But this sense of commitment has really been the key driver for me. And I still feel like, I was gifted to have this chance. And I was gifted to have been given the opportunity to really serve people in this way.
That's great indeed. And I was thinking, because we had such a moment of uncertainty as well, and we had to be able to still communicate this uncertainty. Did you find this difficult, and how did you handle this uncertainty?
At the beginning, I was really struggling about how to communicate on science. And, science is always filled with uncertainties. But, the public, the media wanted to hear clear-cut statements about what is, not what is conditional. And this has been a bit problematic for me, because I had to refrain completely the way I was approaching my communication. But at the end, I think I've learned a lot. I learned a lot about the importance of still being very clear without, cutting corners on what still are the uncertainties of science, because, we should be honest. That, for me, is also a very important element that has been driving all my work throughout these years and during the pandemic. Be honest to people. Tell what you see. Tell them what is important for them.
Absolutely, and be transparent about what you know and what you don't know as well.
Exactly.
I suppose. If we look into the future now, we'll be showing a graph a bit, and we've seen a little bit how the risk of epidemics and pandemics has risen quite massively in the last century alone. Does that mean that actually new pandemics, new epidemics are inevitable in your view?
I believe that unfortunately they are inevitable. So we need to be prepared that it will happen again. And as always is said, it's a matter of when, not if. So we need to be prepared. The world, is overcrowded. There is interconnectivity as we have never seen before in the history of humanity. We are little by little destroying all the wildlife, and the environment is changing quite substantially. And this is together with climate change. It creates really the best possible scenario for having new pathogens emerge and creating new emergencies. So that's why we cannot afford to lower the guard. We should maintain our attention and efforts in making sure that we are even better prepared in the face of the next pandemic, because this will happen. And of course, we need always to look back at history. So we should not forget what happened during this pandemic, what happened in other outbreaks that occurred in recent times, and take stock of all the learning there so that we know how to do things even in a better way in the future.
So how can you explain this a bit more to us, this connection between climate change with animal health, human health? Can you explain a bit? I think it's very close to the One Health concept. Why this means that there might be more pathogens in the future?
The One Health concept is essential to be understood, and is really at the core of what is the risk of a next pandemic. And clearly one of the reasons, just look at SARS-CoV-2, this coronavirus. This is emerged from bats. And in the moment in which we get in contact with the wildlife, with the wild animals, we have more chances that these viruses that are, commensal and not really dangerous viruses for these animals, they can, mutate or become dangerous for humans, and they can be the basis of the spread of a new pandemic. That's why the more we destroy the ecology and this system of wildlife, the more we can have chances of getting exposed to the so-called spillover event, when a pathogens, get transmitted from the animal reservoir into humans. And that, unfortunately, will be the start of the next pandemic. And just to tell you, if we look at coronaviruses, SARS-CoV-2 emerged and caused the pandemic. But now researchers has found that in Southeastern Asia, there are hundreds of coronaviruses similar to SARS-CoV-2 that are living there together with bats, and one day they may cause another spillover and cause another pandemic. So again, we should be prepared and monitor very careful what might be the risk of future pandemic, keeping always this approach of One Health, because only in this way we will have the full picture about what can happen, what are the chances of this spillover event, and how we need to be prepared better in the future.
I was wondering also about, we talk a lot about mosquitoes and climate change and the fact that you have diseases that might come to Europe that we didn't used to have. Is there also something there that we need to be careful about?
Unfortunately, we are seeing this already happening with this climate change and the fact that temperatures are growing in climates such as the European one that used to be temperate. We need to be prepared with the fact that mosquitoes are traveling north or south in the two hemispheres, and so reaching latitudes that before they were never reached by these mosquitoes. And with these mosquitoes, there will not be only the annoyance of the mosquito itself, but also they will carry viruses. And indeed, there are many viruses that are transmitted by mosquito that are extremely dangerous and can cause outbreak, like dengue. And we see also in Europe there have been cases of chikungunya. And so we need to be prepared that we will see more of that, unfortunately. There will be more cases of outbreaks also in Europe. Coming from this type of viruses. So also there we need to think about not only how to control the vector, how to control the mosquito, that will be priority number one, but also how we can advance treatment and vaccines, because of course vaccines are the medicine with the biggest impact from a public health perspective and should always be prioritized in this context.
Thank you. So you started to touch a bit on preparedness. So what can we do to prepare for this? So what exactly, if now we have established that it's not about if, it's about when we might have the next pandemic, what are we doing then to prepare?
Indeed, the work on preparedness is essential. The better we are prepared, the better we're going to respond. And here we are working at the EMA with the emergency task force, and we are looking and scrutinize all the different viral families, which is a work that is led by WHO with a big international cooperation with researchers from all over the world in order to identify among the viral families which are the pathogens they might cause emergencies in the future, and which pathogens could serve as type of prototype pathogens for developing vaccines and monoclonal antibodies, and also studying antivirus, because only in this way we will be able to advance vaccines and medicine to tackle this type of viruses. And even if we were not covering all of them, we will have a starting point that would allow us to go faster once the emergency will arrive, in order to adapt this vaccine to what is causing the new emergency, and therefore being faster. Because as said before, the knowledge that is coming from the COVID-19 pandemic is that, the sooner we have vaccines available for which, the benefit risk is clearly positive, the better it's going to be in order to have an impact on human lives.
So you talked a bit about all this work going on. So it's work going on at EMA, but also you were talking about the World Health Organization. Is it a sort of international collaboration on top? So can you explain a bit the mechanism of that? How does it work? What are we doing at EMA compared to the world? How are we working together towards this objective?
The world, through the WHO, has created a plan through which, according to the different viral families, different groups of researchers, developers, public health experts will work together in order to advance our understanding according to the different viral families, which is about, advancing vaccine, but also understanding better the epidemiology, understanding better the pathophysiological mechanism of how these viruses transmit and cause disease in humans. And only with this full picture we will be able to advance rapidly into giving the right responses once these pathogens will cause an epidemic or a pandemic. And EMA is fitting in with our regulatory role in order to make sure that we engage with developers and with the scientific community in order to make clear what is needed to advance these vaccines and these medicines, so that we can have positioned as soon as possible on our shelves and be ready to use them in case there is a future outbreak or a new pandemic. So our role is really 360 degrees and really working with researchers and developers all over the world in order to advance the common thinking and ensuring that we are better prepared, and in few words, we would know what to do in case of the next emergency.
So, as a summary, we are better prepared in your views, and we were already prepared in 2020, but now we have reached another step again in our preparations, and we're better prepared today, you think?
I think we are better prepared today. Already in 2020, EMA had an health threat plan in place, was one of the few institutions that had this already there, because we knew that something like that could have happened. But on top of this, all the learning that came through the COVID-19 pandemic, but also with the subsequent emergencies like Mpox, for example, we learned a lot there too. And each pandemic will be different. That's another important aspect that we should not forget. So we need to be prepared to adapt ourselves about, what the new pandemic will look like, who will be affected, how these pathogens will be spreading, what type of medicines will be needed and vaccines to be developed. So we always will need to adapt in terms of our response. But all the learning that we are getting throughout different cases are building up on our capacity to better respond in the future.
That's great and very insightful. Thank you, Marco. I think it's actually reassuring to know that if a pandemic is inevitable, we are ready and you're on the case. So in this podcast, we always end with a guest recommendation. So something you might have seen, a movie, a series, a book that has been inspiring to you, and that might or not be connected to the topic we were discussing today. So what are your thoughts, Marco?
Okay, I can think about a book that I read recently and made me think quite a bit, which is not strictly related to pandemics, which is a book about Hegel's word. So, the German philosopher Friedrich Hegel, and it's about, the time he was living in, what was the environment that was surrounding him, and, was really important to build this way of thinking. And this book, which is the author, I think, is Jürgen Kaube, if I remember correctly, talks about towards the end when Hegel went to Berlin as a professor. And that the philosophy of history of Hegel is all built on the concept that the world spirit progresses towards kind of perfection, or at least, it goes towards perfection. And he was thinking that Prussia at that time, which we are talking about the first half of the 19th century, was a state that was close to perfection, which means that was a state that indeed was very progressive. Berlin was becoming one of the important capital cities of Europe, very advanced in terms of technology and the way, the state was built. And when cholera approached from the East, and cholera was a big issue in the 19th century and caused several pandemics, when it was approaching from the East, everybody in Berlin, and possibly including Friedrich Hegel, felt, well, this is a very progressed country. We will be able to deal with cholera. This is not an issue. This will not be a problem. Actually, cholera was a big problem for Berlin and for most of Europe. And allegedly, Friedrich Hegel died of cholera on the 14th of November, 1831. Now, there are still some investigation about what really was the cause of his death. But nevertheless, is a reminder that we should not have this human hubris that we think we can cope with anything nature will bring in the future, because unfortunately we may be terribly wrong. So this is why that even if we are progressing in our ability to cope with pandemics, we should always be ready to come up with new solutions and to learn, because it's not a given that we will do better during the next pandemic. So it's very important that we keep the learning, that we are not yet there, and we should always try to improve in the way we respond to pandemics and in the way we get prepared for that, because this is the key aspect. And nowadays, after the pandemic, politicians have been moving away from public health and pandemic being really a critical area. And this can be a terrible mistake. So we should maintain efforts and attention in order to be better prepared for what the future will bring, because nobody knows what is going to happen.
Thank you. Yeah, good lesson from history that we actually need to look back sometimes to see how we tackle the future, actually. So
I think we should be doing, and there are a lot of other interesting cases in history about a pandemic which are extremely fascinating, and we need to learn from that.
Maybe a topic for another podcast.
Maybe a topic for another podcast, indeed.
Thank you very much. I think we're running a bit out of time and we've reached the end of the podcast, but thank you for for joining us today, Marco, and sharing your insights. Very, very helpful and very insightful. I hope we will have another discussion with you soon on a similar topic then. Thank you.
My pleasure. I hope so, and I hope before the next pandemic anyway.
Before the next pandemic, for
Thank
sure.
you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode today. If you have enjoyed it, please give us a like, share with your friends, subscribe to the podcast, and we hope to see you next time for another episode. Goodbye, and goodbye, Marco. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.